I was standing at the sink scrubbing the last of the grease off the frying pan when Sarah walked into the kitchen. She was dressed for a high-end cocktail party, in a tight black dress, and her heels clicked on the floor as if she had just stepped off the catwalk. I looked up, expecting her to comment on dinner or more likely the mess I had made, but she just leaned casually against the counter and used the microwave to reheat a sandwich. Reflexively, as if talking about the weather, she said, "I'm going out after work tomorrow and won't be home until the day after tomorrow." My hand paused in the scrubbing and I blinked, trying to understand what she had just said, wondering if I had heard her wrong. I asked, "What do you mean, a business trip?" even though I knew her job didn't require overnight stays. Sarah is an accountant, and numbers and spreadsheets don't require you to be gone all night. "No, it's just a trip," she replied, tossing her lipstick into her purse without even glancing at me. It wasn't just the way she spoke, but the way she spoke as if I wasn't even worthy of a real explanation, as if I should just accept it without asking any questions. I stared at her, hoping she would say more, maybe a reason, or even a smile, to show that she was teasing me, but she didn't, just picked up the car keys and slipped them into her usual bag. And she always used the silence between us to suffocate me. I tried again, forcing myself to remain calm, even though inside I felt like a storm was about to break, like something was about to collapse. Whether it was her or me, I didn't know. "Just going out with friends," she said, finally meeting my gaze. "I'm telling you, that's it." She turned and walked towards the door, as if she'd just dropped a bomb on me. Now I know some people might shrug it off and maybe believe their wife and not think twice about it, but I'm not one of those people. And this wasn't the first time Sarah had acted strange. She'd been distant. I guessed she was always staring at her phone, and as soon as I walked into the room she'd lock it. She'd send texts late at night. She'd go to the gym and come back looking more refreshed than when she'd left, not more tired. And when I heard the door close, my chest began to burn. I never considered myself a jealous person until recently, but a voice inside me screamed that something was wrong, that she seemed to be deliberately trying to make me angry. I took out my phone, opened our text conversation, and scanned through her recent messages. Nothing out of the ordinary, just short replies, one-word answers, cold and robotic. But one thing that happened last Friday caught my eye. She had texted me that she was working late and going to the gym after work. "Don't wait up for me," she had said. But now, when I thought about it, she hadn't come home sweaty or with her gym bag, which didn't make sense. My gut told me that something was wrong. It was like knowing you've been cheated on, but without proof. This feeling was about to change. An idea suddenly came to my mind. Maybe it was stupid, but at that moment I was desperate. I needed answers. I took action. I walked over to the closet, picked up the gym bag she always carried with her, unzipped it, and inside, instead of workout clothes, sneakers and a water bottle, I found a neatly folded blouse, a pair of high heels, and a box of mints. Mints? Since when did she need those for a workout? At that moment, I suddenly understood that she wasn't going to the gym, but to meet someone. No matter what her plans were for tomorrow, they definitely weren't with a friend. My heart started pounding, and I had to sit down. My mind raced, recalling every little detail that I hadn't noticed when she snuck away. I wanted to rush out immediately, call her, demand an answer, accuse her out loud, and say everything that was inside me. But something stopped me. I needed more. I couldn't act blindly. I had to catch her, so she couldn't deny it. At that moment, an idea hit me like lightning, clear and unequivocal. If Jessica was lying, and I knew she was lying deep down inside, I needed to catch her in the act, and no longer give her half-hearted excuses or random lies. I doubted myself no longer. I wasn't a paranoid husband making up non-existent problems. Something was going on, and tomorrow I was going to find out exactly what. I carefully put her gym back in the closet, making sure everything is back in place, just as she left it, as if I had never moved them. My heart was pounding in my ears, the throbbing of anger and frustration. I had difficulty sleeping that night, my mind racing with a million thoughts, every possible scenario, every lie she had spun over the past few weeks. Whether it was the first time or had been going on for months, even longer, those nights with friends, the gym workouts, the late nights at work, all looked suspicious now. The next morning I woke up early. She was still asleep, looking so peaceful, as if the world held no worries. I stared at her, wondering how she could lie so completely. Working late at night now seems suspicious in retrospect. The next morning I got up even earlier than she did. Jessica was still asleep, looking so peaceful, as if she had no worries in the world. I found myself staring at her, wondering how she could lie so easily, without a hint of guilt on her face, without a sign of betrayal. She looked so innocent, so incredibly naive. I went to make breakfast and pretended everything was normal. We barely exchanged a simple good morning before hurrying off to work. It was business as usual, but this time it didn't feel quite right. Her kiss was cold and mechanical, like a routine. There was no warmth in it, just the start of another act that would begin as soon as she walked out the door. I moved quickly. I knew she would go to work first, then go to the place she had planned. After that, she had already said she wouldn't be back until the next day, which meant I had plenty of time to figure out what she was really going to do. I made a few phone calls, one to a friend in the technical department who was familiar with tracking software. I'm not proud of what I was about to do, but desperate times call for desperate measures. He helped me install a simple app that could track her phone without her knowledge. It was installed quickly, and I was able to see her exact location in real time. The plan was set in motion. When she came back from work to collect her things, I acted as if nothing was wrong and casually asked her what time she would be back tomorrow, acting like I didn't care. She didn't even notice me and told me that she would be back late tomorrow morning because she was going out with friends in the evening and she would spend the night at their place. Every word that came out of her mouth felt like a lie. Even the way she said "I love you" as she walked out of the room felt scripted, only she knew. As soon as she left, I picked up my phone and opened the app. Her little blue dot started moving, heading towards the city center. It wasn't going to the gym or to any restaurants. She might have met up with friends there. No. She was heading straight for a hotel. My heart clenched. I realized she was provoking me. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. This bold behavior made my blood boil. She thinks I'm too stupid to see what's going on, but I like it when she does that. They underestimate you, think they can fool you, that you'll just sit there while they pull the wool over your eyes. But not this time. I grab my keys, throw on my coat, and head out the door. If she's going to meet someone at a hotel, I'm going to make sure I see it with my own eyes. It's not just about catching her in the act. I want to see the look on her face when she realizes it's over, when the game is up. I drove, my mind racing, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I was no longer angry, not as angry as I had been. I had passed that stage, and now there was only cold, unwavering determination, the kind of determination you get when you know you are about to cross a line. I wasn't just looking for answers. I was seeking the truth that was about to be revealed. And then it hit me, like a bolt of lightning. If Lisa was lying, and I was convinced she was, then I had to catch her in the act. It was no longer working. I no longer doubted myself. This was not just paranoid delusion. I had not imagined anything. Something had definitely happened. Tomorrow I would know exactly what had happened. I carefully put her gym bag back in the closet, making sure everything was exactly as it had been, as if I had not touched a thing. I could feel my pulse pounding in my temples. The rhythm of my anger and frustration was steady. I hardly slept that night. My mind kept racing, conjuring up all the possible scenarios. Was each lie she had told me over the past few weeks a one-off? Or had it been going on for months, or even longer? Suddenly, every night out with friends, every gym class, every late night at work felt suspicious. The next morning I woke up before her. Lisa was still asleep, looking peaceful and serene, as if she had no cares in the world. I couldn't help but stare at her, wondering how she could be so. There was not a trace of guilt on her face, no sign of betrayal. She looked so innocent, even a little too innocent. I made myself some breakfast and pretended that everything was normal. We didn't say much, just a simple "good morning and see you later." She kissed my cheek before leaving for work. Everything was the same as usual, but this time it felt different. Her kiss was cold and mechanical, like a routine. There was no warmth, as if she had rehearsed it according to a script before leaving the house. I moved quickly. I knew she would go to work first and then go wherever she wanted. She had already told me she wouldn't be back until the next day, so I had plenty of time to figure out what was going on. I made a few calls, one to a friend in the technical department who was familiar with tracking software. I'm not proud of what I was about to do, but sometimes you have to do what needs to be done. He installed a simple app that could track her phone without her knowledge. After a quick installation, I was able to keep tabs on her location in real time. Everything was going according to plan, until she came home from work to pack. I kept my cool and casually asked her what time she would be home tomorrow, pretending I didn't care at all. She didn't even bat an eyelid, just said she would be back sometime in the morning because she was staying at a friend's house after hanging out with friends at night. Now, every word she said sounded like a lie, even the "I love you" she threw out as she walked out the door. It was like she was playing some kind of game, and I didn't know the rules. After she left, I picked up my phone and opened the app. Her little blue dot started moving, heading towards the city instead of the gym, or any of the friends she might meet. No, she was heading straight for a hotel. A hotel. My heart clenched in my chest as the confirmation message hit me like a punch in the stomach. She didn't even bother conceal her movements. This boldness makes my blood boil. She thinks I'm too forgetful to notice what's going on in front of my eyes. But people like her always underestimate you, thinking they can manipulate you. You'll be there, clueless, while they're pulling the strings behind the scenes. But this time is different. I grab my keys, throw on my jacket, and head out the door. If she's meeting someone at the hotel, I want to see for myself. This was no longer just about catching her in the act. I wanted to see the look on her face when she realized the game was over. As I drove, I felt like the man in the car on autopilot. My thoughts racing, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I was no longer angry, not as angry as I had been before. That emotion was gone. Now there was only a cold, burning focus. A focus that knew I was about to cross a line from which there was no return. I no longer seek answers, but a truth that I know will destroy everything. The elevator door opens with a ding, and I walk down a corridor that is as silent as a tomb, as if it were about to end forever. Room is not far away, but the corridor feels like it stretches on forever. The brass numbers on the door gleam, as if they contain the answer I've been looking for. I reach for the doorknob but hesitate, my heart racing. I don't knock on the door, but stood there instead. Every part of me was screaming to turn around and leave, but I couldn't do that now. I took a deep breath, raised my fist, and gave a few knocks. Every second felt longer than the last, and then I heard a slight muffled sound. The door opened slightly, and there stood Jessica. It felt surreal, like I had stumbled into a twisted reality where everything looked the same but felt completely wrong. Her eyes widened for a second, letting me see a flash of panic cross her face, but she quickly covered it up. Annoyed. "What the hell are you doing here?" she whispered, her voice sharp and low, as if trying to keep it down. I couldn't speak immediately, my eyes busy scanning the scene behind her. The room was dimly lit. From the hotel's fancy lamps, casting a soft glow on the bed. There he was, a man in a suit sitting on the edge of the bed, his jacket off and his tie loose, looking too comfortable for my liking. He glanced at me as if I were some kind of nuisance, someone who had interrupted his evening plans. He asked who I was, raising his eyebrows as if he had a right to be curious. Jessica stepped forward to block my view of him, grabbing hold of the doorframe as if she wanted to keep me out. "Let me ask you a question," she said, her tone more severe. "Why are you here?" I couldn't believe what I was seeing. She didn't apologize. She didn't seem surprised. She didn't seem at all taken aback. No, she was annoyed, as if I had broken some unwritten rule, as if I had overstepped the mark. "I think the real question is," I said, my voice almost unable to contain my anger, "what the hell are you doing here? Who the hell is Jessica?" She crosses her arms, her eyes narrowing into a slit, and she doesn't even bother to look back at the man sitting behind her. "It's not what you think. That line is so cliché. I'm all worked up. It's not what I think. I'm in a hotel room with a stranger, and I'm supposed to believe that this isn't true? Don't insult me." She rolls her eyes. "Oh, calm down, Mike. This isn't some dramatic TV show." I can't help but laugh, but the laughter is sharp and bitter, and it sounds hurtful. "Calm down. Are you serious? You lied to me, saying you were hanging out with a friend, but you're actually in a hotel room with him." I jerked my head towards the guy who was still lying on the bed, as if it was just another normal night for him. "Why don't you explain what really happened?" She let out a sigh that sounded like she was talking to a child. "Okay, you want the truth? I've been seeing someone else." The words hit me like a punch in the stomach. I felt weak, and my legs could barely support me. Of course I had known it for a long time. I had suspected it for weeks. But hearing her say it so casually, without even a hint of remorse, was like jumping off a cliff into the void. "You have been seeing someone else." I repeated it, my voice even quieter. The anger gradually faded, replaced by something colder and heavier. She shrugged as if it were no big deal. Yes, I wasn't going to tell you like this, but since you decided to play detective and show up here, now you know. I couldn't understand her. She just stood there and told the truth as if it were as unimportant as talking about what we were going to have for dinner. No apologies, no regrets. Just the cold, hard facts hitting me like a heavy stone that just kept sinking deeper and deeper. I nodded to him, who was still sitting there with an amused expression as if he was enjoying the drama unfolding before his eyes. She glanced over his shoulder, her expression softening for a second, as if she were silently telling me that everything was under control, before she looked back at me, her face once again becoming serious. This is Ryan, we've known each other for a while. Ryan, of course, that was his name. He looked like one of those slick rich people, completely unfazed by the chaos around him. I repeated the words, hardly able to speak. She had said them for months, so casually, as if she were just telling me what she had for lunch. My head is spinning, everything is pressing down on me all at once. She's been sneaking around for months, and now she's standing here, acting as if I'm overreacting. I glance at Ryan, who's still lounging in bed, his arms folded on his knees, and watch him as if I'm some kind of sad entertainment. Part of me wants to hit him and wipe that smug expression off his face, but I know better than to let him think I've lost control. So now what? I asked, my voice trembling. You and I have been together for 7 years, and you're throwing it all away for this. Jessica's expression didn't change, as if she were bored. Mike, don't make a big deal out of this. You know it's been a long time since we've been on good terms. She put on a brave face, as if this was an inevitable breakdown between us, as if I had anything to do with her lies and months of sneaking around. So your solution is to cheat on me behind my back with him. She sighed, and that irritated tone made me want to scream. Look, I didn't plan for things to turn out like this, okay, but they did, and here we are, so what's the point of dragging this out any longer? She doesn't care. Not even a little bit. There's not a hint of remorse or hesitation in her voice. She's already gone, it's over. I can feel something inside me break. I don't even realize what's been holding it all together, time. I glance at Ryan, and then at her again. Do you love him? I ask, even though I hate the way it sounds coming out of my mouth. Jessica hesitates, but only for a moment, and says, maybe it doesn't matter, but that's not the point, is it? I stand there, letting her words sink in. There's nothing more to say. She's already made her decision, even before I realized what was happening. Now, standing in the hotel room, I suddenly realize that whatever happened between us, whatever I thought happened between us, is over. Jessica tilted her head slightly, a condescending smile curling the corners of her mouth. Is it over between us, Mike? Her question hung in the air like a challenge. Is it over between us, Mike? She said it with a sneer, as if the whole situation was just a minor inconvenience for her. I felt my body shaking, not with grief, but with pure anger. My chest tightened as I fought to control my anger before it exploded. I stared at her, this woman I thought I knew, but suddenly realized I no longer recognized her. This was not the Jessica I had married, nor the woman I had built a life with. She was completely cold and manipulative. I didn't even know who I was looking at, but she wasn't finished yet. I mean, what did you expect? Saying her voice had become shrill and bitter. You think I'm going to sit here and wait for you to finally notice me? You're so wrapped up in your own world, your work, whatever it is, you don't even see me anymore. You don't see you, I repeat, my voice rising, incredulous. I work my butt off to give us a good life. Everything I do is for us, for you, and this is how you repay me. She rolls her eyes and crosses her arms, like she's scolding an ignorant child. Oh, come on, Mike, don't play the martyr. This isn't about your work. It's about you never being there. You being there, but it feels like I'm not, and I'm sick of it. So your solution is to find someone else, I fired back, each word like a bullet. Instead of talking to me, instead of trying to work things out, you just want to sneak around with him, I pointed at Ryan. He still hadn't budged. He was enjoying it like he was watching a cheap soap opera. Jessica didn't back down. I'm not sneaking around, Mike, I'm moving on, and you're never going to change. Ryan, he sees me, he really cares about you. I laughed at him, finally making eye contact with Ryan for the first time. Yes, I believe he really cares about your happiness. Ryan finally decided to speak. He leaned back, propping himself up with his arms, as if relaxing on the beach. Dude, I get that you're pissed, but what happened between Jessica and me was a while ago. And it wasn't just a fling. I couldn't believe how he dared to talk to me like that. As if we were equals. As if I was supposed to just accept it and move on. What kind of favor do you think you're doing her? Destroying someone's marriage, my marriage, so you can suddenly appear as a hero? Ryan shrugged with a smug smile on his face. Maybe it's none of your business, mate. Maybe you didn't give her what she wanted. I took a step forward, my fists clenched, but Jessica quickly got in my way. She warned, her voice shrill, "Don't even think about it. You can't play the victim here." I stopped staring at her, my heart pounding as if it were going to explode. Victim? I'm not pretending. I've been faithful to you, trusting you for 7 fucking years, and you've been fucking this guy for months behind my back, and I'm the problem. She shook her head, as if she were about to be convinced. You still don't get it, do you? It's not just about the cheating, it's about you never being good enough. I need more than Mike, and you weren't willing to give it to her. Her words stung, destroying what little hope I had left. There was no remorse, no regret, not even a hint that maybe we could make it up to her. She was already making up stories in her head, portraying herself as the victim of some fictional act of neglect. And now she was justifying herself, convinced that it was all my fault. I stared at her, really looked at her, and suddenly, like being hit by a wrecking ball, betrayal, lies, months of sneaking around, all of it. The woman I had loved, trusted, and dedicated my life to for years, she was gone. She had been gone for a long, long time, I just hadn't realized. Silence spread between us, forming an unbridgeable chasm. My chest tightened, anger mingling with an empty sadness. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, but I held back. I didn't want to break down in front of her. When I finally spoke, I couldn't make her feel better. My voice was small, almost a whisper. You could have talked to me, Jess. You could have told me you weren't happy and we could have worked it out together. But instead you ruined everything. She didn't say a word, just stared at me coldly, her eyes vacant. She had nothing left to say. I swallowed hard, my throat tightening. What now? You ran off into the sunset with Ryan, that's what. Jessica looked at me with a kind of condescending gaze. Mike, I don't owe you any explanations. I want to move on with my life, and so should you. I felt something snap inside me, a final tipping point that I didn't even know existed. I looked at her one last time, the woman who had once been my world, and realized that she wasn't worth fighting for anymore. She had made her choice, and so had I. I turned around and walked out of the room without saying a word. My fists were clenched so tightly that I could feel my fingernails digging into my palms. As I stepped out into the hallway, a wave of emotions hit me. Anger, sadness, disbelief, all at once. I leaned against the wall, trying to steady my breathing, trying to control my emotions, but it was all for naught. Everything was crumbling, and that was when I realized I was done. Done with her, done with the lies, done with the pretending, done with it all. I wasn't the one who broke us. She did. In the elevator, I felt time pass endlessly, my mind a blank, but at the same time filled with a cacophony of noise and chaos. I couldn't concentrate, my hands still shaking, my heart pounding in my chest. But there were no more words to say to her, no more explanations to make. And as the elevator doors slid open into the lobby, I had seen enough. I forced myself to walk out, as if my life had not just been destroyed. I needed to get out of that place, away from the glistening chandeliers and polished floors of the damned hotel, away from the air heavy with the scent of betrayal, like cheap perfume. Night had fallen, and the street was filled with the usual din of the city, people laughing, cars honking, neon lights flashing. It was incredible how the world seemed to be going on as usual, as if nothing had happened, when I had just witnessed the collapse of my marriage in an instant. I didn't even have time to get to the car before my legs went numb, and I collapsed onto a nearby chair. The adrenaline that had kept me standing finally ran out, and I felt exhausted. I sat there, staring blankly at the street in front of me. But I really didn't see anything. Numbness was spreading, that hollow, empty feeling of nothingness. When the reality of it all finally sank in, Jessica was gone, and in her place stood a stranger who had emptied my heart, crushed it, and handed it over to some guy like it was nothing more than a cheap trade. I should have seen it coming, and that's what hurts the most. I ignored all the small signs, I ignored all my instincts. How could I have been so blind? I replay every moment in my head, trying to work out if the exact moment she stopped loving me was months ago, years ago. Or if I've just been deluding myself into thinking there was some kind of feeling between us that never really was there. Almost out of habit, I pull out my phone and open up our old text conversations, as if somewhere in these messages, amongst all the I love you and everyday exchanges, I would find clues. But as I went through all the messages, I felt empty, as if I were reading someone else's life, someone else's memories, no longer our lives, our memories. My thumb hovered over her name for a moment, and the urge to call her still existed, hidden by anger and hurt. I want to shout at her and demand an explanation, why she did it, why she chose him, why she abandoned everything, but I know it would be useless. She doesn't care. It's obvious when she looks me in the eye and lies without hesitation. She had already moved on. The brutal truth shocked me. I couldn't get her back. Deep down, I didn't want to see this Jessica. She stood there expressionless, telling me she'd been cheating for months, as if it was no big deal. I didn't want to see this person. She made me feel like there was something wrong with me while she had quietly torn us apart. I stared at my phone for hours, but in the end there was only one thing I could do. I blocked her, deleted our messages, deleted her photos, deleted everything on my phone that reminded me of her. I wanted to erase her from my mind. This wasn't the end, but a new beginning. I leaned back on the bench, the cool night air rushing against my face. I took a deep breath, the first since the nightmare began. I felt the weight of it all. My marriage was over, and the future I thought I was building with her was gone, shattered beyond repair. I didn't know whether to sit there staring blankly into nothingness, or try to make sense of my now shattered life. I wasn't ready to go home yet. The thought of walking into the house we built together made my stomach turn. Every corner would remind me of her, of the lies of those nights. I stayed up all night, thinking she had just gone out with a friend. This is unbearable for me, but where can I go? I don't want to call anyone. I can't explain what just happened. I can already hear their voices in my head, telling me to move on, that she's not worth it, that I'll be better off without her. But none of this changes how I feel, like the whole world is falling apart. I close my eyes, lean forward and rest my head in my hands. I can feel the tears welling up, but I don't want to cry. I don't want to break down, not in the street, like in those tragic scenes in the movies. But the pain of betrayal is suffocating me, crushing me from the inside out. I think about everything we've been through together, the good times, the moments when it felt like our bond was unbreakable, the nights spent quietly watching movies on the sofa, laughing at the stupid ones, the way we used to talk about the future as if it belonged to us. And now, every bit of it feels like a lie. I'd heard people talk about betrayal before, but nothing could have prepared me for the feeling of having a knife plunged into my heart and your world turned upside down. It left me hollow, and I felt like there was nothing inside me. It wasn't just losing her. It was losing the person I thought I was without her. I didn't know who I was anymore. I sat there, motionless, while the world went on around me, people walking past me with no idea of the storm raging inside my head. That's when I realized I had to make a choice. I could stay here, wallowing in my misery and letting it consume me, or I could stand up, leave this nightmare behind and start again. It wasn't easy. It was probably the hardest thing I've ever done, but staying in this dark, broken place was no longer an option. Jessica was gone, and with her I thought, the life we had. But I didn't go, not yet. I stood up, my legs weak, my heart still heavy, but as I took my first step, I was sure of one thing. I was moving away from her, from the lies, from the betrayal, from everything she tried to do to me. I woke up the next morning feeling surreal, alone in my bed. The emptiness was louder than any alarm clock. I had hardly slept, but the sunlight streaming through the curtains reminded me that life continued, whether I wanted it to or not. I lay there for a long time, staring at the ceiling, numb, trying to figure out what I should do now. I had decided the night before to leave, but now that the dust had settled, the harsh reality hit me again. Jessica was gone, and our marriage was over. I was free of her betrayal, but that sense of freedom felt more like a weight pressing down on my chest, dragging me out of bed. I feel exhausted. I go downstairs to the kitchen, which is a mess. Piles of dirty dishes from the dinner that was never cleaned, fill the kitchen. I can't stop thinking about her, what she's doing right now. Whether she's still at the hotel, whether she woke up next to him, whether she feels even the slightest bit of guilt, or whether she no longer cares about any of this. My hand reaches instinctively for the phone, as if I'm expecting to see a text from her. But of course theirs wasn't there, no apology, no explanation. She had made it clear how unimportant I was to her. And now she was out there living her life without a trace, while I stood in our kitchen, no, now my kitchen, trying to put together all the pieces she had left behind, and the wave of anger hit me like a punch in the chest. And it hurt. This wasn't just sadness, or just the end of a relationship. This was betrayal, deeper than anything I had ever experienced. How could she do this? How could she stand there and act as if it was me who wasn't good enough? Anger rose again, and before I knew it, I picked up the coffee cup and threw it across the room. It crashed into the wall and shattered, spilling hot liquid everywhere, but even then I still felt like it wasn't enough. I wanted to destroy more, everything that reminded me of her, the wedding photos, the holiday mementos, the knickknacks we had collected over the years. I wanted to tear them all up, throw them away, burn all the last memories, but I didn't. I just stood there, staring at the mess I had made, breathing heavily, my hands shaking, and realizing that breaking things wouldn't undo the damage she had done. And then my phone suddenly rang. My heart skipped a beat, and a stupid, desperate part of me hoped it was her, that she had realized what she had done and finally wanted to explain to me. But when I saw the name on the screen, I realized it wasn't her, it was her mother. I stared at the name, unsure whether I should answer. Emily's mother, Sandra, had always been kind to me. We weren't particularly close, but she treated me like family. She always asked about me at family gatherings and sent birthday cards, things Emily herself hardly ever bothered with. I wondered if Sandra knew what had happened, and whether Emily had already told her their version of the story. I managed to say, "Hey Sandra." My voice is hoarse and still carries the echoes of the previous words. There is a pause on the other end of the line, as if she doesn't know how to begin. "Derek," she finally says, her voice soft and full of concern. I don't know exactly what happened, but Emily called me last night and she told me that it's over between you two. Hearing it from someone else makes it feel even more real." I pressed my hand to my forehead, the weight of everything hitting me again. "Yes," I whispered. "That's one way of putting it." Sandra sighed, her voice full of sympathy. "She didn't tell me many details, but I knew my daughter well enough to know that if she'd hurt you, I was very sorry. I don't know what happened, but I want you to know that if you need someone to talk to, I'm here." I was taken aback by her words. I had expected her to defend Emily, to tell me that I was not seeing things as they really were, that there was more to the story, but instead she sounded apologetic, as if she knew her daughter was capable of doing what I had witnessed. I was grateful, and my voice trembled, despite my best efforts to control it. "It's just that there's so much going on right now." "I understand," Sandra said gently. "I won't pressure you. Just take care of yourself, okay? You don't deserve to hear those words. You don't deserve to be treated like that." Those words hit me harder than I thought they would. After what Emily had said, after her attempt to put all the blame on me, I had begun to wonder if maybe it was my fault, if maybe I hadn't done enough, if maybe I hadn't seen what she needed. But hearing Sandra say it in her quiet, hesitant way made me realize that whatever excuse Emily had, I didn't deserve to be treated like that. After hanging up, I stood there for a while, staring at the phone, feeling the exhaustion sink deep into my bones. I couldn't keep going like this, reliving every painful moment from the night before, as if I were a masochist addicted to pain. If I was going to get through this, I had to let go, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. I had to stop letting her control my thoughts. I walk through the house, opening cupboards and drawers, and everywhere I see traces of her. Her clothes, her books, the little odds and ends she left behind in her haste to leave. I grab boxes and bags and pack whatever I can find, and then I start packing. It felt cathartic, like I was taking back the space she stole from me. When I was done, the house felt emptier than ever, but in a way, it was almost liberating. It was the first time in weeks that it was quiet and peaceful, and it felt like the house belonged to me again. I didn't know what to do next, whether to file for divorce immediately or take some time to sort my thoughts. But for now, this was enough. I sat on the sofa, looked around, and watched the walls and empty bookcases. It wasn't much, but it was a start, the first step towards rebuilding what she had destroyed. The days that followed became a blur, filled with quiet moments and insignificant little decisions, each one seeming heavier than it should have been. But every time I packed Jessica's things into boxes or deleted another photo, I felt a little lighter. It's not about erasing the years we spent together. For better or worse, they remain a part of my life, but I won't let the weight of her betrayal crush me. I can still remember the moment I finally sat down to read the divorce papers. I wasn't in a hurry to get divorced. I took my time to think about what to do next. There was a ridiculous little voice wondering if there was any way to salvage the situation, if we could talk, if I could forgive her. But then I remembered the night at the hotel, her cold, distant face, standing there covering the truth with lies, happy to be rid of a marriage she saw as a burden. Even if I wanted to forgive her, I couldn't. I knew I could never trust her again. So I signed the papers. It was all very calm, almost anticlimactic. No final confrontation, no dramatic showdown, no accusing her of her betrayal to her face. It was just a few quick signatures and it was done. For me, Jessica was over. As painful as it was, the whole thing taught me more than I ever thought it would. For a while after that, I didn't hear from her. I suppose she was hoping I'd crawl back and beg for some kind of reconciliation. But she underestimated me just as much as she underestimated my ability to see through her lies. I wasn't going to be some insignificant figure in her new life with Ryan. I won't play that role anymore. A few weeks later, I suddenly get a message. Jessica's message pops up on my phone, short and to the point, as if she'd just ruined my life a short while ago. "Hey, hope you're doing okay. Can we talk?" It makes me smile wryly, a dry laugh. "Can we talk now?" She wants to talk. After months of sneaking around and destroying everything we built together, she thinks a conversation will solve the problem. I didn't respond. I couldn't respond. What else was there to say? I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of bringing me back into her orbit. I had wasted enough time wondering why she did what she did, torturing myself over the different course I could have taken. I stopped doing that. In those weeks of silence, I ended up learning more about myself than I had in years. Giving up on Jessica wasn't just for her sake. It was also about giving up on the person I had become in the marriage. Somehow, I had lost the person who had shaped me into the person I thought she wanted. I stopped doing the things that made me happy, the hobbies and passions that made me who I really was. I became a shadow of my own life, a reflection of what she wanted and what she needed, while my needs gradually faded into the background. But now I have the time and space to rebuild, to rediscover the person I buried in that chaotic relationship. I started with the small things, picking up old books I hadn't touched in years and strolling aimlessly. It wasn't a huge change, but it felt like progress. One day I decided to go to a place I hadn't been to in a long time, a hiking trail that Jessica had never liked but that I had loved. The sun was setting, showering the trees with a warm golden light. For the first time in a long time, I felt calm. The chaos of the past few weeks had finally subsided. I stood at the top of the trail, overlooking the distance, and my heart was at peace. I suddenly understood that this was not just about saying goodbye to Jessica, but also about letting go of myself and not clinging to something that had already fallen apart. I was no longer the person who chased after someone who didn't respect me and didn't value me. I was done with that. Jessica's message was still on my phone. I didn't need to hear her excuses or her half-hearted apologies. I didn't need her consolation because I had already found my own. I found it in the quiet moments, in the process of rebuilding my life without her. As I walked back along the path, the sun had already sunk below the horizon, and the sky was shrouded in a beautiful pink and orange shade. I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, not the hope of a dramatic reunion, not the hope of a final confrontation where I would emerge victorious, but hope for myself, for the life I was slowly putting back together. From the ashes that once consumed my entire world, Jessica is a part of my past, but I have finally set foot on the path to the future. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I know that I will be okay.